Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Dawn Marie Holder, and I'm the Career Counseling Specialist in the Office of Student Services. Today is part two of our three-part series with HERMAB, and today we will be talking about employee engagement and in a multi-generational work environment. We're joined by Shakira Ford and Carla King, and they will be our presenters today. We just want to thank them for joining us. And we got started last week with Mr. Shane Howell, one of HERMAB's past presidents, and he was talking to us about managing our boss. And I know many students who participated were left with some interesting nuggets to consider in ways that in terms of new ways or a change perspective in the way that they can engage themselves and their seniors in the workplace. So before we get into today's presentation, I just want to tell you a little about Carla and Shakira, and then we will get started. So Miss Carla King decided to follow through on her curiosity with the human mind by acquiring her Bachelor of Science degree in psychology at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus. Through this desire, she made the decision to expand her academic background further by attaining her Master of Science degree in Human Resource Management in 2017, also at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill. She also is certified in employment law, which she attained through BIMAP. At present, Carla is working as part of the unemployment team in the benefits department at the National Insurance Office. She also sits on a number of committees and associations, including, but by no means limited to, various health and safety and volunteer committees, along with the Human Resource Management Association of Barbados. So I just want to thank you, Carla, for joining us today, and a little about Shakira. And Shakira was with us last semester when when in terms of our first semester collaboration with HERMAB, and she talked to us at that point about interviewing techniques. But Shakira is here with us again, and she's a learning and development professional committed to combining her experience as a theater practitioner with her knowledge and skills in the areas of business psychology to transform training and development models. She provides engaging participatory learning experiences through the use of role play simulation and other forms of experiential methods. Currently, she utilizes this methodology to enhance the learning experiences of varying students and employees. Shakira holds a master's degree in business psychology, a first degree in psychology with management, and an associate's degree in theater arts. So I look forward to hearing from Shakira and Carla today, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn Marie, for your introduction.
Good
Good,
afternoon, everyone.
good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all again for joining our webinar today on employee engagement in a multi-generational work environment. I am Shakira Ford. So before we get into it, let's talk about what we will be discussing today, and that is what is employee engagement and its importance to employers and HR professionals. Then we're going to go into what is a multi-generational workforce and the tips for engaging a multi-generational workforce in general and also during this pandemic. And then we're going to open the floor for any questions that you may have. And also feel free, if you have any questions or comments to, just type them in the chat box, and I'm sure we'll get to them during the webinar. So let's get into it. What is employee engagement? So employee engagement is the extent to which employees feel passionate about their jobs. They are committed to the organization and put discretionary effort into their work. So when we say discretionary effort, we really mean that they care so much about the organization that they are willing to go above and beyond to ensure that organizational goals are met. This may be something as timely as putting in extra work or doing overtime, even not being micromanaged into knowing that they do what they should do. And it is also the key to activating a high performance workforce. So for example, I know we've all had this experience before. We go into an organization and, we are met with some atrocious customer service. And it's like, why do I feel like I am begging you to take my money, And then you will go into another organization and you'll be met with some superb customer service. And you probably might even buy things that you didn't have on the list just because of the customer service. So that is an example of the difference between engaged employees and disengaged employees. So moving on, what it is not. Sometimes employers might get the two mixed up in terms of employee engagement being employee happiness and employee satisfaction, but they are very different terms. For instance, a happy and satisfied employee, yes, that is an important factor to an organization, but happiness and satisfaction is also very relative and very ever-changing. So an organization might be giving making an employee satisfied or happy, but then another organization might come along, probably raise their pay by 10% and probably throwing some dental care benefits. And they are like, maybe I might be happier and even more satisfied at this organization. And then they leave. So researchers are realizing that happy employees and satisfied employees are not enough to create a high-performing workforce and also to retain their employees. So why is employee engagement important to HR professionals and to leaders in the whole? Well, for starters, engaged employees always produce high quality service. And that quality service that they produce, it attracts customers, and the quality that they produce also increases the likelihood that customers will be satisfied with the product. Customers talk about a company's products or services, and they attract other customers to the organization. So with the higher customer satisfaction and brand loyalty, it would increase sales for the organization as well. And the basis of any organization is to increase sales and also produce high levels of profit. So that is why employee engagement is important to employers. So now we go into a multi-generational workforce. What is that? It is basically a workforce made up of employees from different generations, such as the Generation X, baby boomers, millennial generations, and Generation Z. And it is kind of one of the challenges that employers may face in engaging their workforce. The fact that it is so multi-generational. What you might use to engage a millennial, for example, may not be the same thing that might engage a baby boomer. So I'm going to just hand over to my colleague, Carla, who will go into further details on this topic.
The multi-generational workforce, as you will see on the screen, I'm going to ask Shakira to pull up the diagram. There we go. Okay. The multi-generational workforce is made up of basically 4 different generations. Generation B, our baby boomers, are as they're more widely used, the terminology is widely used as baby boomers. They are persons in the workforce from 1945 to 1960. We have Generation X from 1961 to 1980. Generation Y, our millennials, are Gen Y from 1981 till 1985. And Generation Z, are Gen from 1996 to 2008. These theorists have came up with a number of characteristics to describe these various generations. The Generation B, baby boomers, the personality are often said to be optimistic, cause-oriented, collaborative, and driven. The Generation X, they are often described as independent, self-reliant, sometimes skeptical. Millennials, a generation that I am a part of, are interested in continuously learning, high self-esteem, and they are very achievement-oriented. Generation Z or Gen Z, the newer generation, they're resilient, obviously technology savvy, and they are less entitled. Their work ethic, Generation B, baby boomers, are quality minded, team oriented, and company loyalty. They're company loyal. So Generation X then would be, they are interested in work-life balance, efficient. They're often known as efficient. They're focused heavily on results. Generation Y, the millennials, they are collaborative, desires feedback, flexible with their working arrangements. And Generation Z, they are resourceful, looks to find meaning in their work, and they have a strong work ethic. We're going to move on now to communication, where the baby boomers are, they are rotary dial telephone operators. Mainly, obviously, this was the technology that was available back in the day. They prefer face-to-face dialogue. Generation X, they are more familiar with emails. The millennials, instant message, text, WhatsApp, etc. And Generation Z, similar, which are text and social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., etc. In terms of technology now, the baby boomers are Generation B. They are touch tone, telephone, TV, and calculators. The same thing with Generation X, but they also are familiar with pagers and word processors. And Generation Y, desktops, cell phones, and internet were their means of technology in their time. While the newest generation, the Generation Z, they are more familiar with tablets and smartphones and social media. The actual generation the actual technology that is actually ruling the world right now. Right? So we're going to move on to tips on how an employer can engage a multi-generational workforce.
So before we move forward into some tips, can you think of anything you can put in the chat? Firstly, do you agree with the data that was found in terms of the generation you might be from? Does it relate to you, and in what aspect? And also, can you think of any tips that would engage a multi-generational workforce? We're just going to give you a minute. If you have any ideas as to, what can engage a multi-generational workforce.
I see Jillian mentioning teamwork.
Teamwork, yes, that's definitely a good one.
Yes, that's a good one.
We have Shara here. I was born in 1979, but very familiar with current technology. That's great to hear, because I know many persons in that era are struggling with the technology, but definitely getting some help from the millennials.
Correct.
We have Jody here, embracing other perspectives. Definitely. Okay, we have Clyde here. The use of multiple modes of communication will be useful. Multiple modes of communication. Can you expand on that, Clyde? I know we have the WhatsApp, we have Zoom, we have Google Meet. Teenage doctors that help.
I have teenage doctors that help.
Lovely. Yeah.
Jody prefers face-to-face interaction. She's Gen Z.
I prefer. Okay, that's great. So how are you coping then with this new environment that we are in and having to use the technology? How is I don't know if you're working with an organization, but how are they engaging or fostering that from you? This is a question for Jody. Oh, it took some time. Jody saying it took some time to get used to.
Yeah.
And anyone else, how are you being engaged during this time in the workforce, in your organizations? I have Jillian. I am a Generation Y, and I can relate to wanting feedback. I embrace constructive criticism. Okay, lovely, lovely. And are you getting that from your organization? Are you being engaged, so to speak, in your organization with the feedback that you're giving here now? Okay, so we're going to leave that question open. How are you being engaged right now in this environment? And we're going to move on to tips on how you can engage a multi-generational workforce.
Okay, some tips that employers can use to engage their multi-generational workforce. Employee engagement surveys. Through these surveys, they can, find out a lot of information from the employees, how they're engaging or how they're doing in the company, how they perceive the company, etc. A suggestion would be to include questions such as, would you recommend this workplace as some way to work? That's a question that can tell if a person is enjoying working at a particular company. Another question could be about leadership. Does leaders and your bosses and managers, etc., communicate effectively? Keeping employees engaged and being transparent with the employees. Do they know all that's going on within the company? Are they actively kept informed, right? Flexible work environments. I guess we are seeing that right now with obviously remote working during COVID. There's also the recommendation to have flexi time on a normal basis, where some employers prefer to come to work. Some people prefer to come to work early. Some people prefer to get into work later. Obviously, this includes and has obviously taken into consideration their life duties in terms of if they have children, they have to drop off before work, etc. Some persons may, appreciate coming in at 10 o'clock instead of having to get to work for 8:15, etc. The use of technology to engage employee experience. Same, I guess remote working will come up a lot because that is the norm right now for most companies, and that's the method of working right now due to the pandemic. Obviously, this has to be, obviously we are dealing with a multi-generational workforce, so we have to be careful in relation to just springing new technology on obviously older employees that they're not familiar with. That has to be taken into consideration as well. The next tip would be giving employees control over their careers. Some employees appreciate, a little more flexibility in terms of what they want, where they are in life and what they want to achieve. Gen Z may appreciate projects out of their comfort zone to acquire new skills, since they're a little newer into the workforce, obviously, than baby boomers. And the baby boomers, they may want to take control by, passing down their knowledge and teaching the newer members of the workforce their skills and insights and experiences, etc. Right? Communication, as I had mentioned previously, is a very important engagement technique with for employers. They want to keep their employees, they want to make sure that they communicate effectively with their employees, be transparent, be honest about everything that's going on, be frank with their expectations, etc. Share the purpose and the mission and the vision, etc. of the organization and the value statements, so employees can become a little more emotionally involved with what the organization is trying to achieve, so that they would be able to, if they can get an understanding of what exactly is expected, they'll be able to maneuver better in relation to getting the goals and the objectives of the organization achieved, right? Accommodate different learning styles. We have a number of learning styles. There's visual learning styles where some persons prefer to see images and pictures. Some persons are visual learners. Some persons are auditory learners where they learn more by hearing. For example, with lectures and speeches, etc. Right? Verbal, different forms of communicating, writing, etc. Speech as well. This is something that you have to take into consideration in engaging a workforce and training a workforce and getting employees skilled enough to do what the organization sets out to do. Training for eliminating stereotypes. Obviously, we're in 2021 and we have a wide selection of different kinds of people, all kinds of different people from all different backgrounds, race, religions, sexual preferences is such a big thing right now. Nationalities, in Barbados, especially xenophobia has been said to be raising its head a lot. We prefer to see Barbados in the positions and Barbadians getting the jobs, and we're opposed to bringing our CARICOM neighbors to get to taking out our positions, etc. So all of these are things that need to be taught to engage employees, keeping them sensitized and making sure that they respect it and have a tolerance level for all different backgrounds. And the last one is to facilitate mentoring with the different generations. Everybody can learn from one another, right? The old can learn from the young and the young can learn from the old. Obviously, the older generation would have more experience and knowledge of what's going on in the company, and the younger generation may have new ideas, newer ways of doing things that would be a little easier, and both can learn from each other. And I think a collaborative effort on both sides can help propel the organization in the right direction. We're going to move on now to the next slide. How can employees engage a multi-generational workforce during this pandemic?
So again, we're going to open up the board, the webinar to you for any tips. First, you can tell us if you agreed with any of the tips that were presented previously. Which ones do you relate to more? And then, are there any tips during this pandemic that will help to engage a multi-generational workforce as well? Okay, we have a question here. What are your views on showing empathy more so than sympathy? And what about building trust, especially in this environment? Okay, so that's a question here, showing empathy rather than sympathy. I definitely agree with that because especially for the later generations, especially for the later generations, they might not catch on to the technology as the millennials would. And I don't think that enough patience, is given towards that. Enough training as well given to that. So that could be very stressful for the earlier generations to come to grips with. So more showing sympathy, or I understand what is being done to help these persons to adapt to the new environment and to this technology that we have now.
I agree with Shakira. Unfortunately, empathy is not something that is experienced with everyone. Being that we're discussing multi-generations, some persons are more empathetic than others, and obviously you have to understand that you're dealing with different personalities. But I think the main thing is to sensitize not only the younger generation but the older generation, because a lot of them are also stuck in the normal way of doing things, and that is really a big issue. They do not want to speak, or they have a hold on not learn to do things from a different perspective. This is where they were doing things for years. It worked. Why not continue and stop I've heard persons actually say, why you even confuse the place now with all this new thing when the older thing was working just fine. Yes, that may be the case, but the majority of the times the older way of doing stuff would have been a longer way, and the newer way would be make things a little easier and cut costs a little for the organization. I think it also has to do with emotional intelligence. Obviously, different um, persons handling situations differently. Some persons are more open to actually come on board, and some persons, as I said, are just stuck in their ways and are not interested in learning new ways.
But that's why emotional intelligence is very important in leaders, especially, justifying out, okay, yes, you might be stuck in your ways, but I mean, this is something that has to be done because this is the environment that we are in right now. How can I ease the process, or make it easier for you to transition to this new technology environment? So I guess it's definitely leaders as well having to play a part in empathizing with that generation.
Yes.
Okay, we have a few more comments here. Unless the employee survey is mandatory, it will not engage employees as a leader would like. Okay, so let's open up that conversation.
Hi, it's Nicholas, by the way. So Keisha, the employee survey is a tool. It should be used to gain employee feedback. So the employee survey is not necessarily used to get employee engagement. Is what you do or what you use from the inputs to generate outputs to create employee engagement. So for instance, say you're getting feedback from staff saying that they don't like the work culture. The workplace culture could be anything to do with how managers relate to staff, how in terms of time arrangements, pay, anything relating to that. You then, as a leader or a manager within an organization, should come up with remediations or plans to combat the issues that have come out of the employee engagement survey. So the tool is only as useful as the information that it receives. So if staff are honest in their responses, because sometimes you would realize that based on the time frame the engagement survey is sent out, whether it's a time that, let's say that it's sent out right after bonus was paid, you're going to get a very high employee engagement score. Or let's say it's sent out after the organization went through a restructuring, the engagement score is going to be low. So you have to be very careful when you send out the survey and what you get from staff. And then, like I said, on the flip side, you have to be able to take what you've gotten from the survey and be able to turn that into valuable outputs. Because as an example, I work for an organization that every single year the employee engagement survey would come out. They would ask questions. HR would sit down with the staff and tell them, well, these are the issues and this is what we're going to do. And then nothing would happen until the next year. And the staff just lost faith in the process. So you have to be able to, both employees and employers have to be able to be honest and be able to work along with the process.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you for that, Nicholas. Yes, definitely pro employee engagement survey because as Nicholas said, once it's done right, once the information is presented accurately to definitely gather what you want to find out from your employees, who best to ask, how you would like to be engaged rather than the employees. Okay, leaders in this current environment should start each day with a check-in call, have a conversation, not to really understand their employee, have a conversation, not via email, to really understand their employees. I definitely agree. As Carla said earlier, communicate, especially in this time.
Yeah.
To keep everyone up to date. Yeah. Okay, so let's go into some tips now on how we can engage a multi-generational workforce during this pandemic.
So, okay, some tips to engage the employees during COVID-19. Obviously, we're all dealing with a very stressful and draining time. Whether we are working or not, it can still be considered very stressful. And work-life balance usually takes the different burner on a lot of benefits that employees prefer. They want to be able to work and still have time to do certain stuff, certain personal stuff, whether it's going to the gym, get their children to and from school, etc. This has been a big issue and a topic for many of years on how employers can assist employees and keeping them engaged. So during this pandemic, yes, many of us are working from home. There are still some of us that are physically in the office, but either way, work-life balance employers should make an effort to make work-life balance something maintainable and present in their employees' life. During the pandemic, obviously for remote workers, we have a lot of employees working from home. They still have to tend to their children. The children are home working, learning from home as well, from learning, having their classes online, etc. So it is a very stressful time for some, trying to manage work meetings, Zoom meetings, Google Meet meetings, and still having to keep an eye on their kids, make sure their kids are paying attention, etc. I think that is very important for employers to assist employees during this time, now more than ever, obviously because of the new demands that they have going on in their lives. I think things like breaks, allowing employees certain breaks, is very important. I think where possible, meetings can be scheduled, and I know obviously it's not every situation where obviously emergencies come up, yes, and you may have a situation where you have to run to a meeting immediately, urgently, but keep it at a point where meetings are scheduled so employees will be able to maneuver their day around scheduled meetings or scheduled deadlines, etc. Give them flexible times for submitting deadlines. They have I don't know if they have deadlines. They have a certain amount of a certain quota to meet. Give them flexible times to meet the quota, as opposed to balancing it with balancing or trying to do it just as in the work in the physical space. I think baby boomers. I think this ties in with a lot of what we were saying previously in terms of the technology adaptation to technology during COVID. I know a lot of them probably would have had to be trained to work from home, and obviously now some of them didn't have a choice if they wanted to continue to make a contribution in the workplace. So, as Shakira and everybody was saying before, be empathetic in terms of introducing this new technology to the older generation. Make sure they're comfortable enough. Make sure you explain to them, and they understand what the technology is used for. How is it effective? Why are we using this technology, and as opposed to something else we were using before? I think these are all important points that needs to be explained to the older generation so they can understand the significance of the new technology, right? Developing employees through training initiatives. I think that kind of ties in with what was the previous point in training and introducing the newer technology to the older generation. Now their skills can be developed. They have extra skills that they will learn now because of COVID, obviously, because they had to get on board with technology. Financial and mental assistance. Obviously, as I stated in the beginning, this is a stressful time for everybody, a draining time. Yeah, we may not be all financially stressed because some of us are still working, but mentally it's taking an effect on many persons who are still working. As I said, balancing working from home and the children at home with their classes, etc. Not knowing when this pandemic is going to end, thinking about studying the future, etc., etc. It can be mentally draining, and I think especially places like HR, I think that's where HR professionals come in terms of, a company should not be only interested in giving employees a paycheck at the end of the day. I think checking in with them mentally is also a good thing. Emails can be sent the same way, encouraging employees to take care of their mental health, giving them tips and ideas. I don't know, in terms of meditation, exercise, yoga, encouraging to read. Well, if they have time, pick up a skill, do a new recipe, bake a cake you always wanted to bake. Just little tips to help them balance and to cope during these stressful times. As I said, yes, some of them are still working, but the load is still heavy in different areas. So mental health now is a very important thing to keep employees afloat, right? Some people are at home with individuals they're not accustomed to being home with, and that can be mentally taxing as well. You know, some people have issues and problems at home. They use work as an avenue to get away. And obviously that cannot happen right now. So that can be mentally taxing and exhausting. So all of these little things and tips and just checking in with your employees generally to see how they are doing and how they are coping and giving them ways or different avenues or ideas of how they can reduce some stress and keep seeing basically, because that's basically what all of us are trying to do in this pandemic, trying to keep a level head and keep as sane as possible and make it out, right? Mentorship between the generations is the final tip. And basically, everybody can learn from everybody. There's something that yes, I may be new and how fresh it is, but an older employee older employee has the experience and the knowledge, right? So we can both learn from each other. And I think that that's the whole idea of this in this entire project, this presentation, just trying to get the generations to keep a good relationship, to learn from each other and achieve the goals of the organization, obviously, and achieve your personal and professional goals as well, right? Anybody else has anything else to add?
Okay, we have a comment here. Good points, Ms. King. Lovely.
Thank you. I'm going to hand back over to Shakira now. You can post your questions into the chat if you have any questions, any comments, any queries that you need us to clarify.
Okay, as we wait for questions to come in, I have a question for Nicholas, our fellow HR professional, Mr. Nicholas Roberts. So based on everything that's been spoken about here today and what's not, well, how do you know, or how do HR employers know when their employees are engaged?
Hey, good afternoon again. So as you already said, the employee engagement survey is a very useful tool, but that's not the only tool. Employers should be having conversations, or leaders rather, whether you're a manager or supervisor, want to oversee someone or you have a direct report, you should be having conversations with your staff. Obviously, before COVID, it would have been, or should have been rather, face to face. And now we are working in this virtual environment. You should be having, whether it's check-ins, Google Meets, whatever the case may be, but regular conversations with your staff. Also, using metrics, HR metrics, to see what is going on. So, for instance, your attrition rate. So, looking and see what your turnover looks like. So, if your turnover is high, if it's higher during a different period of the year, why it's high. And like I said, just having those conversations with, for instance, as an exit interview with people that are leaving, so that you can understand why they're leaving the organization and the issues that they may have encountered whilst being there. Also, like I said, our organizations rather should be open to feedback. I think someone had mentioned it within the chat. It's okay for people to be receiving criticism or constructive criticism, but you have to be willing to take it, whether it is that you're an employer or an employee. And employee engagement can be measured through many different ways. Like I said, the engagement survey is a very, very useful tool, but it's not the only useful one. Like I said, so the employee engagement tool, having conversations with your staff, looking at the different HR metrics, whether it's that you look at exit interviews or your attrition rates. Those are just some ways that you can look in to see how engaged your employees are. Um, Also, like I said, making sure that the outputs that your staff are giving to you or something that can be used. So, for instance, you may have an employee and they may be doing their work, but is the work up to the standard that it should be? And sometimes it comes down to people are a mismatch. So sometimes if someone is in the wrong role, or it may not be that they're not competent or that they can't get the job done, it may just be that the job is not mentally stimulating, or or it's just not what they want to do, but they're just going through the portions, the motions rather, doing going through the PSA. So that is where conversations coming to are very vital and very important. And sometimes that is where organizations fall down, because these conversations unfortunately do not happen as often as they should.
I agree. And to keep employees engaged, as I was mentioning earlier, yes, we all come to a company for financial gain, but I think that that's not the only thing that keeps an employee engaged or
Hmm.
makes that employee stay at that organization. Me personally, I like somebody that cares. As many of us would have stated earlier, checking in, you know, having empathy, having understanding that yes, I work 5 days a week. I work Monday to Friday. My bank does not open on Saturdays. I need to step out for an hour to get some business done. Having understanding employers like that goes a
Hmm.
long way, just showing compassion and understanding. I have my kids to collect. I don't have anybody else to collect them. Can I be excused for 15 minutes to go get my kids? If I have to drop the grandmother, my mother, or yeah, who knows, at their relative, just can I have 15 minutes to do that? Nobody else can pick up my kids. All of these are different little situations in which employees appreciate. And as I stated, yes, we all come for financial gain, but at the end of the day, I know that a lot of people do not stay only for financial gain. They want engagement, they want understanding, they want great communication with employers, and that also plays a very important role in engagement. If I
Yeah,
notice that my boss is, a little lenient with me and understanding and, you know, allowing the certain situations, I will say, well, this is what the situation was, this is what the situation is. Make sure you give back, make sure you put back in your time, make sure you be productive and produce work and meet your deadlines, meet your quotas, etc. That's the least he could have done, and this is what I can do. We both did our part.
definitely, Carly. You hit the nail on the head. And all the right areas, and that's where total rewards comes into play. Because, like you so already said, compensation. Yes, a lot of people come to work for compensation. A lot of people are driven solely by compensation, but you will see after a while, the more money you make, the more money you want. And sometimes, no matter how much money you are making, if you are working in an organization, to your point, that you don't have an understanding boss, your boss is not communicating with you, people are not empathetic. Why am I going to stay here? The money might be great, but at the end of the day, I've worked in an organization. In one HR department I worked in, someone told me I would rather go and work for less money and work for people that are much more understanding, as opposed to stay here and be paid what I am being paid. So you can throw the world of money at people, but if you don't have other factors going on within the workplace, people really will not be apart from being satisfied or engaged. People just will not be happy, and it will show in the work that they deliver to you.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with you, both Nicholas and Carla. As the point said, yes, happy and satisfied employers are good, but when employees are engaged, that is definitely the nail on the head there. Nicholas, again, as an HR professional, what challenges are you facing right now in engaging a multi-generational workforce in this environment?
I think you guys mentioned a lot of it. It comes down to the different learning styles, as well as the different expectations, for lack of a better word, that the different generations may have. So, for instance, people, hold on a second.
Okay, give Nicholas a chance.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So people that come from older generations sometimes, this may be a bad stereotype, but sometimes, they may see that, I don't have a problem working as long as my employer wants me to. They will come in, and if my boss asks me to work for X amount of hours, I have no problem in doing it. Whereas the younger generation are looking much more for work life balance. I was on a work call the other day, and I heard a fellow colleague said, that my generation, because the young lady she's a Gen Y as well. She was saying that, that we work to live, as opposed to older generations that live to work, and is basically saying that, that our jobs are not us. Whereas you may see in the older generations, they have what you would call a cradle to grave job. So sometimes, they may get a job from the time that they're 16, 17, 18, and they may work that job up until they retire. So they're much more committed, in inverted commas, to the job, because they've put in so many years. Whereas younger people, yes, even though they may love their job, they may enjoy their job. Sometimes it is just a stepping stone for another career. So, like I said, it ties back into what I was saying before. Yes, you may be paying me well, but are you doing things within the workplace that are engaging me, and are the benefits that you're offering me, are they interesting me? So sometimes pension may be a big thing for older persons. Unfortunately, people that are younger don't necessarily look at pension as a benefit until they start getting in their 30s, 40s, or whatever the case may be. So it's just offering different benefits packages, different engagement programs. So sometimes younger people may want a gym membership, whereas older persons may want gift vouchers to go to the supermarket to do shopping. So it's just different things that may appeal to different demographics within your organization that may make them say, well, this is a good place to work. It varies from person to person, whether it comes down to preference or taste, or whether it comes down to their age range.
Thank you for that, Nicholas. We have
Thank you, Nicholas.
another query here. My problem is maintaining the organizational culture in remote working.
Yeah, Jillian, that is a problem for HR departments and organizations across, not in Barbados, just across the world. Remote working has obviously removed the the touch and feel aspect of human interaction, and obviously culture is something that is intangible. It's not something that can be felt by the human hand, but you can feel your workplace culture. So for instance, if you walk into an organization and you say good morning to your colleagues and no one answers you, that is organizational culture. You know what to expect. But you're at home working by yourself, and sometimes you may only have reach out to your colleagues, or if you are doing a client facing job, you only speak to clients when you have meetings with them. Everyone becomes detached from one another, and that leads to the erosion of culture. But if the culture within the organization is strong enough, it will prevail. So if you have a positive and a strong culture pre-COVID, it will continue, and it will be the strands will continue. So for instance, if it is that people used to checking, if the culture was that people used to check in within each other before COVID, it will relate the same way in a virtual environment. Same way if it was a negative workplace environment or a negative culture, it will continue the same. So if people then used to check in on one another, it will be same premise whether it is that we're in the office next to one another, or if we're working virtually.
Definitely agree with you there, Nicholas. A strong culture. A lot of organizations who didn't even have an established culture, who was just flexible in their culture, so to speak, or
Yeah.
didn't have anything to expect or any expected behaviors or what's not. Research shows that some of them are definitely struggling during this time of the virtual environment. So definitely having a strong culture beforehand would have benefited this environment.
And not only a strong culture but a positive culture, because like I said, if it is that you have a culture and it has negative connotations or negative aspects of it, it will translate the same way whether it is face to face or in a virtual remote working environment.
Thank you very much for that, Nicholas.
No
If there are
problem.
any more questions, you can place it in the chat. But we will be, I'm watching the time right now. We are running out of time. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. We hope that you enjoyed our webinar. Carla apologizes. She had to leave. But thank you very much for attending, and passing it over to you, Dawn Marie.
You, Shakira, for another very informative and engaging discussion. I think it's really important for us to really understand that there is value. It doesn't matter where you fit in the equation. So whether you're a Gen Z, whether you're a Gen Y, whether you're a baby boomer, there are there is a value that you place in terms of the organization. So whereas we are very keen to maybe automate processes and be able to get a spreadsheet to tell us things, there is that individual who understands the process, who's been around and know the trends, and how you are able to balance that within the organization is very important. And I really want to thank each one of you, students included, for your participation. You raised some very interesting points. There are a lot of challenges, and I think what Nicholas said is very important. if we had an engaged group before, we will be able to have engagement even in a remote environment. And it's really, you know, the critical thing is how do we keep all of our stakeholders, you know, how do we attract them in the way that they may need to be attracted? So is it a gym membership? Is it vouchers to do shopping? These things are all very important and may not have anything directly to do with the job task that you're assigned. So students, I do hope that you were able to take some useful tips away. So again, I just want to thank Hermab as well for collaborating with us again this semester. And students, thank you, because without you coming, we wouldn't be able to have a successful event. So thank you, everyone. Continue to stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Thank you, Shakira. Thank you, Nicholas. And thank you, Kate, Carla, even though she had to go. So thank you all and take care. See you next week. Bye-bye.